Political and legislative movements from the North Atlantic region this week, drawing strictly on official announcements and published commentary.
And our mission today is to give you a clear, straightforward summary of what's happened. So let's get right to the headline.
In official news, we'll be covering the U.S.-Greenland Joint Committee reaffirming its Arctic partnership.
We also have the mandatory retirement age being removed for the public sector.
And Erling Eidsgaard is returning to the Løgting, that's the Faroese Parliament, as a substitute MP.
Finally, we'll look at the law that finalizes the transfer of dementia care to the municipalities.
Then in the second half, we'll turn to the political commentary and debates.
And there was a lot this week. Big arguments over the Premier's defense of the Suðuroy tunnel project.
A lot of opposition mounting against a phased takeover of the Aviation Authority.
A deeper look at the democratic problem with substitutes in the Løgting, which we just touched on.
And also controversy over language law changes in public tenders, plus some fiscal warnings about the Tórshavn housing partnership.
And we'll end on the democratic crisis that's looming over the Runavík municipal re-election.
It's quite a list.
It certainly is. So let's start with those official announcements beginning in the wider North Atlantic, specifically in Nuuk, Greenland.
Right. The annual meeting of the U.S.-Greenland Joint Committee was held on December 8th. The Danish government was there as well.
And this committee isn't new, is it?
No, not at all. It actually marked its 20th anniversary last year. It was established back in 2004 under what's known as the Igaliku Agreement.
So what's its purpose, really? Why is this meeting so significant?
Well, it's the main engine for cooperation outlined in plans like the 2020 Common Plan, especially regarding the Patufik space base.
I see.
So the joint statement they released, it really reaffirmed their commitment to a strong, forward-looking relationship. It's all about mutual interests for a secure and, prosperous Arctic. It signals the U.S. is in this for the long haul.
That's very clear. Okay, let's move from Arctic strategy to domestic policy here in the Faroes. A big shift in labor rules.
A huge shift. On December 8th, the minister, Muthfang, officially eliminated the 72-year mandatory retirement age for all public employees.
And this has been a long time coming, hasn't it?
A very long time. Pensioner interest groups have been advocating for this for years.
What was their core argument?
It was basically an anti-discrimination argument. They felt the age cap was unfair to older workers who still had the desire and, frankly, the capacity to keep working.
So now public employees can just work as long as they want to?
As long as they are able and willing, yes. It's worth noting, Tórshavn municipality actually did this on a local level way back in February 2022. So the national government is, in a way, catching up.
Interesting. Okay, let's talk about the Løgting, the parliament. A familiar face made a return this week.
Yes, Erling Eidsgaard. He's back as a substitute MP for the Tjóðveldi party. He's stepping in for Hervor Palsdóttir, who is returning to her maternity leave.
And Eidsgaard's role as a substitute has been pretty central to the news before, right?
It really has. He was brought back in temporarily just before this to vote on the very contentious free abortion issue, which is a key concern for Palsdóttir.
It highlights how important those substitute seats are in a tight vote.
Exactly, and it's getting tight for their party. Tjóðveldi now has only one remaining substitute available for its minister in the Løgting. Their bench is getting very thin.
And we'll see later how that feeds into the whole debate about democracy and substitutes. For our last piece of official news, let's turn to public service reform, the dementia care handover.
Right. On December 2nd, the law was finalized. It consolidates the entire dementia care area under municipal responsibility. And importantly, it passed unanimously, 30 votes for, none against.
Unanimous? That's rare.
It is. But while the Alzheimer's Association, the Alzheimerfélagið, welcomed the move, they also issued some pretty strong warnings.
They did. They weren't just going to let this happen passively.
No. They stressed that municipalities have to actually prepare, they have to prioritize this, and they need to collaborate, especially among the different elderly care consortia.
Did they flag any specific needs?
They did. Two things in particular. First, the need for special provisions for younger people with dementia, say under 70 or 75. These are people who are often still physically active and can get lost in a system designed for the frail elderly.
That makes a lot of sense.
And second, they emphasized maintaining and developing the existing day centers like Glyvrum and Skotarok. They also said there's a critical need for more Package 1 services, which is all about early intervention like cognitive stimulation therapy groups.
So it's not just about transferring responsibility, it's about investing in the right kind of care.
Exactly. The quality of care from here on out really depends on that local investment.
Okay, that seems to wrap up the official announcements. Let's move into the second part of our report where we look at the week's big political debates. And we have to start with the multi-billion kroner question, the Suðuroy tunnel.
Premier Aksel V Johannesen is pushing a loss proposal forward. He wants authorization for about 70 million Danish kroner.
70 million? That's a lot of money just for planning.
It is, but it's specifically for preparation, design, and, crucially, the bidding process.
So what's the strategy here? Why ask for that money now without committing to the full construction?
It's a political safety valve. The premier says the goal isn't to start digging tomorrow. It's to get a rock-solid, precise cost estimate from the bidding process.
So they can back out if it's too expensive.
Precisely. The political system keeps the option to just halt the project if the bids come in too high or if interest rates make it unworkable.
And the justification for even taking this first step.
It's really about regional sustainability. The tunnel would connect 99% of the population with a fixed link, which is up from 91% now. Suðuroy is facing, a declining population, lower incomes, a higher proportion of elderly residents. This is seen as a lifeline.
But that cautious approach did not stop the critics. What was the main financial argument against it?
A commentary written under the pseudonym Hin Skeivhali was absolutely scathing.
That translates to the wrong slope, right?
It does, and the author argued that it is profoundly irresponsible to push a multi-billion kroner project without first figuring out the basics. Who pays? What will the tolls be? And what other parts of the national budget have to be cut to afford this?
So the criticism is that they're focusing on the engineering but not the financing model.
Exactly. The author says user fees alone can't possibly finance it and called the whole debate over the technical route a pitiable distraction.
But that route choice is a huge deal for environmental groups.
A huge deal. Environmentalists Marita Gullklipp and Jens Kild Jensen called the official Tunnelsfalagi route political vandalism.
Vandalism, that's strong language.
Because they say it destroys the area with the greatest biological diversity in the entire Faroe Islands. We're talking about Storavatn, Sandsvatn, Muhagjörnir.
And they had specifics to back that up.
They certainly did. They listed 24 species that would be red listed, like the rare plant mystaret. They also mentioned the Svanvangur spider, which is only found there and in Iceland.
So this is not just a genetic environmental concern.
Not at all. They say this is the destruction of the Faroes' biological crown jewel and are pushing for an alternative route that avoids it.
So you have the financial critique on one side, the environmental on the other. But then there was a counter-argument that suggested the environmental opposition was politically motivated.
That's where Hans Martin Leidersen comes in. He made a specific accusation of media bias, claiming a journalist, Johan Mortensen, was using the public broadcaster to spread propaganda against one of the proposed routes, the Djúpadals project.
And how did he rebut the environmental claims?
He essentially called them hypocritical. He pointed out there are already heavily trafficked roads near Sandsvatn that nobody complains about, but this new, shorter section is suddenly a catastrophe. He called it a strange way of looking at the whole picture.
And did he suggest a motive for this opposition?
Yes, he claimed it's purely tactical. He thinks they want to kill the Djúpadals project now, only to later push for a different route, Mulan-Sandvíkur, which he argues would be even more devastating, especially for the island of Suðuroy.
Fascinating. So the tunnel is almost a proxy war for different visions of the country's future. Okay, let's move from under the sea to the air. The issue of aviation sovereignty.
This is all about a law that would allow a phased or partial takeover of aviation sovereignty from Denmark. And the Sambandsflokkurin party is firmly against this incremental approach.
Why are they so opposed to doing it step by step?
They argue it leads to real chaos and undefined responsibility. They point to the immigration area as a past failure where a partial takeover created huge bureaucratic problems for citizens and businesses.
So for them, it's all or nothing.
All or nothing. They say aviation is so complex and internationally regulated that you need a fully prepared, clean takeover. Safety has to be the top priority, not political symbolism.
That sounds like a practical argument. But it was then criticized on a democratic level.
It was by Sjur Skáli, a Social Democrat MP. He saw their opposition as a serious threat to Faroese democracy itself.
How so?
Because the proposal was something agreed upon by both the Faroese cabinet and the Danish government. For a Faroese MP to then use their seat in the Danish Parliament to vote against their own government's agreed policy, well, he argues that could cripple the whole political process.
So it's about political unity on the international stage.
Precisely. Skáli said his own party, even when they disagree, respects these agreements. You don't undermine your own authorities from Copenhagen. It raises a big question about political loyalty.
Let's bring it back to local politics. There's a lot of friction in Tórshavn over how to solve the housing crisis.
Yes, the Folkeflokkurin opposition in the city council is fighting a plan to invest 20 million DKK, possibly more, into a partnership with Busta, the National Housing Fund.
What are their main arguments against it?
Two main critiques. First, they say it's not financially sound because the estimated rent, we're talking 12,000 to 13,000 DKK a month, is just too high.
So it won't actually help the people who need cheap housing.
Exactly. It helps the well-off, which defeats the purpose. Their second critique is about market dynamics.
In what way?
They argue this partnership creates market distortion. The municipality essentially becomes a direct competitor to private developers, and they worry this will scare off private investment in construction, which is what they really need to solve the housing shortage long term.
So their solution is for the municipality to enable construction, not get into the business itself.
That's their position. Provide land, ensure good conditions, and let the private market build.
Okay, let's revisit that issue of political substitutes we mentioned earlier. MP Helgi Abrahamsen had to clarify his stance on this democratic problem.
He did. He was correcting the narrative from a radio show, and he wanted to be very clear. He stressed that he sees all members of the Løgting as equal, whether they are substitutes or not. That wasn't his issue.
So what was the democratic problem he identified?
His problem is with what he called a swing door system in the cabinet, where ministers resign their post, become an MP for a day to cast a specific vote like on the abortion issue, and then immediately return to the cabinet.
Ah, so it's about manipulating the vote count.
That's his argument. He says ministers can't just arbitrarily exit and enter the cabinet simply to guarantee a majority on a key vote. He feels it undermines the integrity of the government.
It's a very interesting point about the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. Okay, shifting to the economy, a cabinet proposal about language met some serious industry resistance.
Yes, the cabinet wanted to change the tendering law to allow certain big projects to be bid on in languages other than Faroese, and both the Craftsmen's Association and the Consultants Association rejected it flat out.
Why? Wouldn't that invite more competition from abroad?
It might, but they argue it weakens the Faroese language and, more practically, creates unequal competition.
Unequal how?
Their point is that Faroese is the working language on every construction site and in every consultancy here. If big materials start coming in other languages, it introduces ambiguity, reduces understanding, and ultimately puts local firms at a disadvantage. They insist everything must be in Faroese for fairness and transparency.
Our final point tonight covers what sounds like an incredibly messy democratic situation in Runavík municipality.
It's extremely complex. The municipality has to hold a re-election on January 13th, 2026, all because of a one-vote margin dispute from the election way back in November 2024.
That's a 14-month delay. The population must have changed quite a bit in that time.
Massively. Since the original vote, 28 citizens on the electoral roll have died, 253 have moved out, 260 have moved in, and about 60 have turned 18.
So the voter list for the re-election is completely out of date.
Severely out of date. And a candidate in the re-election has highlighted just how unjust this is.
What's the core injustice?
The candidate points out that about 202 people who moved out of Runavík, who no longer live there or pay taxes there, will still get to vote.
While the new residents?
While 268 current tax-paying residents, the newcomers, and the newly 18-year-olds are denied the right to vote.
That is a stunning democratic mismatch. You have non-residents deciding the future of the people who actually live there?
It's a profound question about the legitimacy of the whole election. The candidate also suggested that this chaos is happening because Runavík lacks strong political representation at the national level, making it vulnerable to this kind of incompetence.
What a week. It really feels like the Faroes are grappling with these fundamental questions about their own political rules, from who gets to vote to who even gets to sit in parliament.
It really puts a spotlight on the fact that democracy isn't static. When things change, the rules have to be able to change too, or they can start to fail the very people they're meant to represent.
Like and subscribe to PalsFundamentals for more content like this. Sources linked below.